Hi, I'm Jim Barnett. My mom used to say I was born with my motor running. I love to be on the go. I'm on a mission to check out as many interesting places and as many interesting people as I can. And along the way, I want to see who's got the best food. Hey, you're welcome to ride along, but I gotta go. We're headed to a homecoming. No, not one of those where you buy a corsage and pick up your date. This one's a lot bigger than that. This one involves an entire city and an industrial icon in America's history. We're headed to South Bend, Indiana for the International Studebaker Meet. And while we're there, we're going to find out there's a lot more to that area than just Studebaker. Hey, these are fake! Studebaker and South Bend are like one and the same. South Bend is the home of Studebaker. Not only the manufacturing brand, but the Studebaker family too. Before anybody says it, I know. There are people saying, what's a Studebaker? The short answer is that Studebaker was a car company, and that's true, very true. At one time, it was one of the world's biggest car companies. In fact, one of the nation's biggest companies. Before the Great Depression of the 1930s, they were building 50 different car models and had 7.5 million square feet of manufacturing space. They were huge. Do you drive an electric car? Well, Studebaker built those back in 1902. Studebaker was the first one to come out with the flatback trunk and the wraparound rear window. They were the first company to come out with a compact car. It was the Lark back in 1959. If you were shopping for a car any time before the 1960s, chances are you would have looked at a Studebaker. And that's why there's thousands of people who still own them. And why a few hundred of them are coming home to their birthplace, South Bend, Indiana. There's every make and model you can think of. Boxy ones, sporty ones, compact models, pickup trucks, farm trucks, military tugs. Whoa, you went back a little too far there. That's a Conestoga wagon from the 1800s. Studebaker had a long manufacturing history way before they started making cars. 5 brothers started the Studebaker Brothers Manufacturing Company way back in 1852 on this little piece of ground. Their first products were wagons for miners, farmers, and the military. In fact, historians claim that half of the wagons used in the Great Western Migration of the 1800s were built by Studebaker. By 1874, they had a 20-acre plant and were known as the largest vehicle house in the world. When the whole idea of horseless carriages came along, the Studebakers were a little cautious, sort of like people thought television and the internet were just passing fads. But the handwriting was on the wall. Everything turned to cars. And just before the Great Depression, they had 50 different car models. They were on the cutting edge, too. They were the first car company to have an outdoor test track. And that's where I caught up with some Studebaker purists who came from all over the U.S. and Canada for this Studebaker homecoming. Brian Woods from British Columbia, Canada, drove about 2,300 miles to get here, and he really knows his Studebaker history.
People that don't know anything about Studebaker, they say, what's a Studebaker? And you say, are you kidding me? Like, the Studebaker family were millionaires before the turn of the century. Yeah. And they built all the wagons that opened the West. All those chuck wagons you saw going across were built by Studebaker. And they go, oh, and then they say, you know, the Civil War came along and Studebaker made a lot of money.
Brian said a mouthful when he said the Studebakers made money. Here's the house that Clement Studebaker had built in 1889 at a cost of $300,000. That's over $7 million in today's money. It's called Tippecanoe Place, and it sits on 3 acres of land close to downtown. Talk about losing family members. This thing has 2,400 square feet of living space. Not everyone at the Studebaker meet came as far as Brian, but a lot of them came quite a distance. Where are you guys from?
Shelton, Connecticut.
And your name is?
Mike Durso.
I'm Ken Lee LaShore from Milford, Connecticut.
Jerry Forrester, Douglasville, Georgia.
Where'd you drive from?
Near Fort Wayne, Indiana. Mike Darch.
And where are you from?
I'm from Orlando, Florida.
Naturally, I wondered what it was that made these cars so special. And for each person, it was a different story.
You know, my family started out with Studebakers, and I remember them as far as 4 years old. And I guess it sort of got in the blood, you know.
The car is far ahead of itself. It was ahead of itself when they came out in the 60s, as far as design goes.
They give you more than you paid for, really. They really did.
My Canadian friend summed it up for a lot of the drivers.
Design-wise, they were so far ahead of everybody that they were almost behind because they were so far ahead. The 53 Studebaker Lowboy, like the one that's behind me, is the only automobile that's in the Smithsonian Institute of Art.
I asked Jerry Forrester, who owns that lowboy that Brian talked about, how he felt, and he had a more practical answer. What made Studebaker special?
Well, that's hard to tell, just the advancements in the technologies they had, like the hill holder brakes.
For anybody who hasn't driven a manual transmission car, that time trying to shift on a hill with gravity pulling you backwards can be pretty scary if you're not used to it. In the 1950s, Studebaker, the company, started to roll backwards, just like that standard transmission car on a hill. What we know for sure is that the big three car companies had price wars in order to boost their own sales. And we know that Studebaker joined forces with Packard, another car maker, to try and survive. Like everything, there's plenty of opinions.
I just think they couldn't keep up with the times and produce the volume to keep in business. And, you know, I attribute it to probably lack of senior management.
They didn't have the money to upgrade their factory facilities and so on. So the factories were old, their methods of production were old.
Jerry gave us all a good laugh with his take on it.
When Packard and Studebaker merged, they said it was like two drunks trying to hold each other up crossing a road. So they were both pretty well on the downward path by then.
Sadly, Studebaker closed its plants in 1963. When you come to South Bend, you can be immersed in the car company's history at the Studebaker National Museum. They've got 3 floors packed full of products made by Studebaker, plus all kinds of photos and other artifacts. That museum is just part of a museum group that includes the Oliver Mansion. You might be wondering who Oliver was. I wondered the same thing. That's because, like me, you're probably a city slicker, and city slickers have never heard of it. But the Oliver chilled plow came from here. If you've ever plowed a farm field or even worked with dirt in a garden, you know how frustrating it is when your tools won't cut through the soil. Well, back in the 1800s, as people moved west, they were finding out that the soil was a lot harder to work with than what they were used to back east. Plows back then were made of brittle cast iron, and any obstacle in the dirt could snap the blade. And remember, back then, that plow meant food for your family. Well, a guy by the name of James Oliver came up with a process to rapidly chill, get it? Chilled plow. He chilled molten metal and produced a plow blade that western soils wouldn't break. Within a few years, his company was making thousands of plows and shipping them to several different countries. In fact, they were the largest plow manufacturer in the world and eventually one of the biggest farm implement companies in the world. And his house? When the main manufacturing plant began generating power and installing electric lights, they ran wires a mile or so up the road to the house, the first one in South Bend to be wired for electricity. Another name that's big around here is Bendix, Vincent Bendix, and you need to thank him every time you start your car with a key instead of a crank. He's the guy who came up with the idea of an electric starter for cars. He went on to invent and make all kinds of parts for cars and airplanes. A lot of people saw South Bend's centralized location as one of its biggest assets. That's why 2 very important highways in America's history once came together right here. You got to remember, before automobiles, the average road started out as just a dirt path through the woods and probably wound around from Mr. Jones' farm over to the big tree, then up to the big rock, then it twisted to avoid Mr. Smith's property, and so on and so on. When bicycles became popular, their riders were more particular than horses. They wanted smoother and more direct roads. Later on, when automobiles started to outnumber bikes for travel, it became obvious that the nation needed smoother, harder, longer, and more direct roads built and maintained by the government. It became known as the Good Roads Movement. Two different groups started working on plans for national highways. The Lincoln Highway Association was formed in 1913 to establish a route from New York to California, and the Dixie Highway Association was formed in 1915 to establish a route from Canada to Florida. Those roads went on to be built, and right here at Washington and Michigan Streets in South Bend is where America's travel history came together. There's a self-guided driving tour that takes you to several significant spots around the area, but there's a lot of interesting stuff that's not on that tour, like this address, 229 South Michigan Avenue. If you like crime stories, this is an important spot, not because of the food they serve now, but because of what used to be there. The old Merchants National Bank used to sit here. On June 30th, 1934, it was the last bank ever robbed by the notorious John Dillinger gang.